Hello, y'all, and welcome to another Mondays with May. That's right. Get your beverage, get your project, come on in, say hello in the comment section. Let me know where you're watching from and what it is that we are doing together today. What's on your needles? What's on your hooks? Well, I still got this Premier Fruit sock yarn on my needles. If you are new, this is what we're looking at, Premier Fruit sock yarn in the color Plum. Now, here we are talking about, I talk about this all the time, you don't have to use sock yarn for just socks, right? If you're wondering how far two skeins, these little skeins, this is acrylic, by the way, so, you know, not everybody likes acrylic socks. I think these are about it's number one fingering though, I think they're about 236 yards. So if you're wondering how far 236 yards goes, well, this is two of them. And we're almost, I would say we're almost to the end of our second skein here. I'm not even going to lie, you guys, I'm a little bit nervous about working with this with y'all on camera, because if you've seen some of my other videos, right, you know how I feel about joining yarn on camera, right? I'm not good at it at all, you guys, at all. So did you watch my my Saturday video? Was we're talking about the tool sale, that back to crochet, back to school tools and supplies sale, you guys. And that was at We Crochet, right? Crochet.com. And I talk to you guys all the time about how those two Knit Picks and We Crochet are the same company technically, some of the same stuff, but some websites, sometimes the website's geared towards more to crocheters, sometimes Knit Picks is more to knitters. So Knit Picks is now giving us the same tools and pattern sale, right? 10, 20, 30, and up to 40% off. I haven't shopped it yet, but you know, if you've seen me working on this Lion Brand baby blanket, right, you know how much I love this project bag. So I'm really still like, oh, maybe I need about 3 or 4 or 5 more of those, because then, you know, we can, let me look at this stuff. This stuff should be in a project bag. We got wild yarn here next to me, loose, right? It should be in a project bag. So I don't know, you guys, we might have to get a bunch more of those. But Knit Picks is now having, they're now having the their tools sale, so it's going to go on simultaneously, right, at the same time as the one at We Crochet. But I think because they started theirs just like a little bit later, right? So theirs is going on until the until the 16th. So I'm trying to think today, if you're new to my channel, I do pre-record. Oh my goodness, you guys, I don't even know if I introduced myself or not. That's kind of where we're at today. If I didn't, hi, my name's May. That's what kind of day I'm having, y'all. Did you want to know what kind of day I'm having? I don't think I introduced myself, but I don't actually remember. Hi, my name's May. I love yarn. I love to knit and crochet. Those are my hobbies. And I also happen to have been born visually impaired, legally blind, and completely colorblind. So I mostly knit and crochet by feel. And I do live in the Spokane, Washington area. Spokane complex wildfires all over the news right now, right, you guys? So, and I do think I'm sounding better than I did last week. I think it's like the smoke is still heavy here, obviously, but things are less active, right? Winds aren't blowing as much. So I hope I'm sounding better to you guys. I hope you can hear me better. I feel like my throat's not hurting as much. So anyways, though, so I do pre-record my Mondays with May video on Sunday afternoon, sometimes Sunday evening. So it's Sunday, the 9th right now. So that tool sale is going on over at Knit Picks, back to school, back to crochet, back to knitting, whatever. Because I know some people don't actually knit and crochet in the summertime. I can't believe it. I'm like, what? How could you take the summer off? But some people don't. They just find it like too hot, right? They're like, it's hot out and I don't want a blanket on me, you know, or a sweater. I mean, I can always find, if you watch my Start Something Saturday videos, you know, I can find all the little stuff to work on. So it doesn't bother me to do it at all. But you know, not everybody does. And so, you know, I think it depends too, right, on what you're doing in the summer and if you have kids home or not, right? If you crochet, I think you could crochet around little kids. Because, you know, if they rip out your work, they rip out your work. But I'm not going to lie, like knitting, if I was knitting something like this and I had like a 2-year-old, I don't know if I'd have it around them or not. Because, you know, they just grab one end of this needle and man, your project is gonna slide off, right? And like for somebody like myself, probably not gonna get all those stitches back on the needle, and you know, you might have to scrap your whole project. Whereas like crochet, if they pull it out, it's like, oh well, wherever they pull it back to, they pull it back to, and you can just grab it from there. And you know, I mean, obviously, right, if it's a lot of work, it's a little frustrating, but it's nothing like for me, like it'd be like losing a knitting project. So I could definitely see where some parents might, you know, if they have like small kids, you may or may not like crochet or knit with them, you know, like unless they're, you know, occupied or something. So anyway, so that's the sale that's going on over there. So I just took a quick peek at the Knit Picks one. It looks like it's a lot of the same stuff. Obviously, the pattern section of the sales are different, right? The ones that Knit Picks are the knit patterns. The ones that we crochet are the crocheted patterns. But the one thing that I saw on the Knit Picks sale that I did not see at We Crochet is my eyes are burning, you guys, from the fire smoke. Sorry. Oh my goodness. I don't know. Whew, my eyes are burning. One thing I saw is those stitch stoppers, right? You guys know I really love my stitch stoppers. As somebody, that would be the thing to have. If you've got little kids around and you are knitting, I would definitely have stitch stoppers. You get those on the ends of your needles, and that way they're not saying they wouldn't or couldn't destroy your project in a matter of seconds, but it might be less likely to happen if you had some of those stitch stoppers on the ends of your needles. So anyways, y'all, how are you doing? If you want, do you want like a quick little update on our fire situation here? If you're not, you know, if you're not like watching the news and all of that, I think as of this morning, as Sunday, the fires, there's 3 fires that started all at once on August 1st. Well, not like all at once, but in a matter of hours of each other, right? The Old Trail Fire, the Autumn Lane Fire, and Fairview Fire. And so they put them all together as a Spokane Complex Fire, and they're about 10,000 acres right now. So I think the Old Trails Fire, which was the biggest one and really destructive, ended up really not growing that much more, whereas the other one, the Autumn Lane Fire, really grew a lot, sadly. So about 10,000 acres, and I think they're saying about over 900 structures are, you know, lost, damaged, destroyed, and that's, I think, the majority houses. But and obviously they're still going through, right, neighborhood by neighborhood, house by house, making sure things are safe to return people to. So we're really grateful to everybody who's coming along to help, you know, whether it's our firefighters or National Guard or people making donations. We're getting lots of donations in at our churches, and I think that's definitely, you know, one way that you can go with direct assistance and donations that you want to give to people, like clothing, you know, and blankets and household items, is give to churches, and then people can go to those faith organizations and can you know, get what they need, right? So we're seeing that. I know that Convoy of Hope has a big, I think like 3 big semis that rolled into a church out in Spokane Valley. So they're taking donations there, and they're taking, you know, obviously like items, donation items, and of course they're also taking you know, monetary donations and that kind of thing. So there's all kinds of ways that people can check. I keep checking on my little yarn ball, but the good thing is fingering weight yarn, so it is gonna go a long ways, right? But I'm just was like worried. I was worried, y'all. I was worried it was going to run out there. But anyways, so there's definitely lots of ways that people can help. Because I know people, a lot of times people like to help, but at the same time, right, people are like, I don't know who to give to and where to give to, and you know, that kind of a thing. So there's lots of ways. Just, you know, kind of check out, you know, carefully, right, like who you're going. Like I trust Convoy of Hope, and some of those places where you can give directly to, like our animal shelters, and you know, places that have you know, a long-standing sort of reputation as a charity. And you know, but do your due diligence, right, look into it, you know, because obviously, unfortunately, right, scams happen whenever there's a natural disaster or something like that. The scammers are sadly sure to follow, right? Unfortunately, so very sad but true. So gonna turn our little top here. We don't know how long we're gonna make this thing, and like I said, we don't even know if we're gonna finish it yet. But anyways, you guys, I was talking to you a lot about my ex-boyfriend who did wildland firefighting, and you know, which we're still friends, by the way. I don't know, some of you actually know him. Some of you who watch this channel have met him, you know, because you've known me from since that long. And so some of you know him, some of you met him, and you know exactly who I'm talking about, right? The man who I dated when I was in college, and who lived up on the lake there. So anyway, but by the way, he has an invitation to talk on this channel and, you know, share with us anything. Like, I've talked to him about it, and we're still friends, all of that. But he doesn't want to do that, right? Like, and that's totally his choice. Like, I respect him, love him. It doesn't bother me. You know, I mean, I wish he would come and talk to us about being a wildland firefighter. But you know what? He doesn't want to, and that's fine. That's totally fine. Like, having a friendship with him is way more important to me. And just being able to talk to him is way more important to me than getting him to come on here and talk to us about his heroics as a firefighter, right? So, which, you know, I got to hear about them because I knew him and we were close, and you know, we lived together, right, for several summers and all of that. So. And even though he talks firefighting with a lot of people, like, that's like, people want to ask him. We'd go places, I'd hear about it all the time, you know, because we'd go someplace and people would be asking, what was fire season like, or what do you predict fire season is going to be like, or whatever. And you know, I mean, fires are unpredictable. I mean, that's just the thing about fires. They're unpredictable, and the winds are your biggest factor. When winds shift and winds change, and you get a gust of wind and it blows it this way and that way, and so fire's unpredictable. And then on top of that, right, like, you know, what kind of fuel you have in that fire is going to change how the fire behaves. Like, he did his firefighting up here, and so he understands the fuels that we have here, whereas other places of the country are going to have different fuels and different types of trees and that kind of a thing. And so that can cause your fires to behave differently as well, right? So there's lots and lots of factors going on there, and he just did what he did. And you know, and now he is retired, by the way. And if you're wondering what he's doing now, he is replacing the bolts on the track of a snowcat. Well, I don't know if he's doing that this very minute, but that's one of his projects that he works on during the summertime when he's not, you know, doing his own stuff, right, is replacing the bolts on the track of a snowcat that he drives in the winter time. Yeah, he could drive a snowcat. He drives a snowcat in the winter and works on it in the summertime, and obviously works on it in the wintertime when it needs to be worked on, right? So I don't know, you know, but that's what he's doing. If some of you are like, what's he doing? I mean, working on a snowcat and driving a snowcat in the winter up in the Cascade Mountains. I imagine it's kind of like driving a tank or something like that. I could be way wrong. I don't know anything about driving a tank at all. I know nothing about it, but you know, that's just my guess on that. Probably a little similar, probably a lot different too, right? Probably very different but similar. Probably a snowcat's a lot simpler than driving a tank, most likely. much simplified, a simplified version. Probably feels a little bit the same riding in it, but probably different too. So I've been in that snowcat up in the Cascades. So anyway, so I was reading some of the different articles in our news and watching some of the firefighting, and one of the oh, getting a notification right now about evacuations. You guys know we're at Earpiece. I got my screen reader, and I'm getting a notification right now about the fires and evacuation zones and stuff like that. So anyways, I've been reading and kind of researching a lot, trying to keep up with what's going on. And I was reading an article from one of the firefighters who was working those fires, and he was a retired from, I want to say it said Army, I think, but it could have been a different branch of our services, but I want to say Army. And that he talked about how he previously served in Iraq, in active combat zones. And like I said, I think it was one of the times I said, it looks like a war zone, right? Those neighborhoods look like a war zone where the houses are just demolished. And here we have this firefighter coming on who was like, yeah, I served in Iraq, and it was he said he served in Iraq, and I think the Army, and he said those firefighting zones, he said I served in Iraq, and those fires were like nothing that I'd seen in active duty. He's like, this is way more dangerous, like more extreme than anything he saw in his active duty in Iraq. And so that kind of can give us, obviously we've never served, right? I haven't, but I've never served in the military, right? But at the same time, when we think about war zones, right, and we think about like the things that those service members see, obviously when you're serving in different countries during different times, and you're going to see different things, right? One person can serve for 20 years and experience not a lot of trauma, and somebody can be in for a short time and experience major trauma. So not trying to say that everybody's experience is the same at all, but he was like, yeah, I served in Iraq, and I never saw anything like this in Iraq from what he was doing on the ground as a firefighter, right? Getting out of that truck and hitting those fires and seeing just the level of destruction, right, of active fire, and smoke, the conditions and the smoke, and just ongoing explosions, right? Like I said the other day, right, it's just like explosions, right? Like I said, I think to me that sounds like a propane, right? It sounds like a propane tank exploding, and that's what the firefighters are talking about too, like just the explosions that were just ongoing. So many things, not just propane tanks exploding, but all kinds of other things are going to explode in fires. And so that kind of a similar experience, so obviously a lot of us are not going to be able to to relate to that still, but it does kind of give us like an idea of the level of destruction and what our firefighters were looking at, right? Some of the videos are just incredible, right? Just terrifying. And like I said, my ex-boyfriend was like, yeah, you're running on coffee and adrenaline and prayers, and that's all you got, right? You're just jumping out of your truck and going from one fire to the next, right? Just hitting it with the hose and going on to the next, and not really even been able to like think and process or anything, which is probably for the best, right? You don't actually want to be thinking about what you're doing, and because then you probably wouldn't, you probably, and that's what he would say, is like, you just do it, right? You just get into that mode and you just do it, and you don't think. And that's what I think a lot of them do too. And I think it's a good, when I was reading that article today, it doesn't surprise me at all that we have firefighters that were former service members. That does not surprise me. I think it's a great profession, sort of transitional profession for a lot of our service members to go to. Both law enforcement and firefighting, we see a lot of people who leave the service and get into those fields. And I think for a variety of reasons, right? If they sort of have the heart to serve their community, and they're obviously in those professions, you have to know every single day that you go to work, you might not come home, right? And you sort of have to be the kind of person who can take that on. And that's what every one of our service members does, right? When they put on that uniform and they sign up, they know too that they might not come back from their missions. And our firefighters and our police officers, they know every single day when they leave home that might be the last, right? They might not see their family. So I can see, people sort of have the temperament, right, to do that, to do something selfless and protect and serve and do that kind of physical work, that kind of demanding work. I can see where that'd be a good transition for them. It doesn't also surprise me, like my ex-boyfriend said that when he was the IC, but he was so he'd work with directing, like, helicopter pilots and the planes and everything, and he said he worked with a lot of his back in the 90s, that's when I was dating him, and he said a lot of the sorry, I'm getting another notification on the Autumn Lane fire, and that they're happy to announce some evacuation levels have been downgraded. We're happy to hear that. Thank you. But he said that a lot of the helicopter pilots that he worked with were Vietnam vets back in the 90s, and he saw a lot. So if you're wondering, right, like what did some of those Vietnam vets do when they left, the service, right? They were still, if they had the skills, right? Because sometimes you think, like, what are you going to do with your skills? And I know that could be, like, I should do just a whole separate video on that. But when people leave the service, sometimes they don't always know, like, what kind of profession to do and what to do and where your services and your training and some of that stuff can, what skills do you have and what are you going to do with those kinds of skills? And for people who might go into the service for a short time, they might think, well, I might do this for a short time, but then, what do you do after that? He worked with a lot of Vietnam pilots that were helicopter pilots when he was working in firefighting. So that's definitely true. Like, that's what some of our Vietnam service members did when they left the service, was they were flying helicopters and working on wildfires and dropping water and flying planes and dropping retardant and working at all kinds of different levels, driving heavy equipment, right, driving bulldozers and doing different professions where they might have some skills, right, that were sort of transitionary from their service. So in fact, I got to have some cool experiences with him, because he lived on a lake. Some of you know that. Some of you visited us on the lake, and he lived on a lake, and we were out. Which if you're on a lake, or you're gonna be out in the lake, and you're near a place where they're doing water drop, they're taking water, right, retrieving water and dropping it. First of all, if they're using that lake, right, you shouldn't be in that lake. You need to leave that water clear for them to come in and come and go. But we were on the lake fishing one day when the pilots decided to use the lake that we were in for water. And let me tell you, that's something. When you're in the lake, right, and you're on your little boat, and here come the helicopters, you feel it when they come down, because we were in the water. He knew the pilots, so it wasn't like, and he knew like how to communicate with them and how close to get and how to stay clear, and he knew what he was doing. But we were definitely heading in. By the way, when we saw the helicopters coming for the lake that we were in fishing on, we were like, okay, it's time to go in, right? It's time for us to evacuate the lake, right, so that we can leave it available for them, and they don't have to worry about us being down in the water. But you feel it, let me tell you, you feel it in terms of like the air, right, when those helicopters are coming down, and you feel it when you're on the water, like just that they can like churn up the water, even when they're just lowering those little I don't even know what you call them, but those little buckets or whatever that they fill up with water. you feel it when you're out there on the water. And I could definitely see it's a little tiny lake, but I could definitely see why, they would prefer that we exit the lake. And I think for most people, that would be the smart thing to do. But I was on the water one time with him when they were coming in, and I have to have another cool experience with him too. And when he was driving me back, because he would work a lot, and then like take a Sunday afternoon, he'd try to get off so that he could drive me back home, right? Especially if I had to start, if I was in classes and stuff like that, because I lived with him during my call. Oh my goodness, you guys, we hope that we don't have a knot here that we have to. I think we're gonna make it, but we'll see what's happening here, right? I think we're gonna be okay. But he would work, and then he'd drive me back like on a Sunday afternoon or something like that. And so we were driving back one time, and he'd had the day off, and of course all the pilots and stuff, they knew him, and they liked talking to him, and they liked working with him for a variety of reasons, right? Because he's well, he was very willing to use his air support. He was one of those people who was like, you run your planes and your helicopters from sun up to sunset, as long as the pilots are, as long as they feel safe, right? But I think they like to work with him because it's money for them. Obviously, it's money for them. It's a peak season where they can make a lot of money. But also, he was really willing to listen to them too. Like if they didn't feel safe, if the conditions weren't safe, he definitely took input from them, on the ground. If his pilots were like, yeah, no, we can't do that right now, or whatever the conditions, he would listen to them and take input from them while he was on the ground. So they liked working with him. All of his people really liked working with him. So he was driving me back one day, and one of the helicopter pilots had landed his helicopter out in one of the fields that we had to drive by, because he lives in a pretty remote area of eastern Washington. So I mean, outside of a little tiny town that has a post office. He lives several miles outside of that town on this little lake. So he lives in a really, really remote area, like more remote than where I'm at now. Okay, if you guys think like I'm several miles from a bus stop, but I still got this highway. Like he lives in a way more remote area than even I am now. So one of the helicopter pilots was just taking a break, and just sort of stationed himself out in this field just to get out of his helicopter. Get a little time out of it, but also I think he wanted to be close to that lake that my ex-boyfriend lived on, so that if he needed, to start doing some water runs or anything like that, he was close by. So we were driving by as he was taking me home, and my ex-boyfriend was like, "Oh, hey, I want to go talk to this guy for a minute," and he's like, "Do you want to see if you can see the helicopter?" And I'm like, yeah, I want to see, I want to see if I can go see the helicopter, because I hadn't really had a close up of a helicopter ever before. And so we got out and talked to the guy, and I had my guide dog with me, Genevieve, my very first German Shepherd guide dog, but we left her in the car, and she was fine, you guys. Like, we left the window down for her. It wasn't like super hot. We left the window down for her. My ex-boyfriend went over and asked him. He's like, "This is my, it's my girlfriend," and so I had my white cane with me, and he said, "Can she check out your helicopter?" And he was like, "Yeah, go climb on up there, go check it out." So I left my dog in the car, because it's a pretty, it's a pretty steep kind of ladderish climb. So I left her in the car, but we left the windows down, and my boyfriend actually stayed down there and talked to the pilot, because they just wanted to bullshit. Like, they wanted to bullshit with the IC, and he wanted to talk with them about the conditions that day and all that, and what was going on. So they could see and talk to the dog if she was nervous. So she was fine, but he just was like, "Yeah, go ahead if you want." But so I would have loved it if the pilot would have gone in there with me, right, to like answer my 25 million questions of like, what does this do and what does that do, and right, like, how do I fly this thing? I would have wanted to do that if the pilot would have come in there with me, but obviously he just wanted to get out of his helicopter, right? He'd been in the thing, and he just wanted to like get out of it and be on the ground and have his feet on the ground. And so, but he did let me go in there, just like turn me loose with my white cane in there and let me go in and explore and touch all the things. So I mean, it was really cool because I was bigger than I ever expected it to be. I don't know. I was just thinking it was going to be small. And since then, I've seen like the inside of a small Coast Guard helicopter. That thing was tiny. I was thinking that was going to be a big one. And I was shocked at how small that Coast Guard helicopter was. But this helicopter was really, really big, and I was like, not like really big. I'm sure there are bigger ones. Okay, I'm sure that there are, but I could definitely like, I could sit in the cockpit of it, and then I could actually go into like the cargo area of it, and I could easily stand up in it. I could easily walk around it. It was cool, to like check it out and see the space. It was very spacious in there. I don't even know what kind it was. I should have asked him, but I didn't. Oh, I probably did, but this was like, over 20 years ago, so I probably don't remember, but it's very likely that I did ask him what I was looking at and what I was playing in, but it was empty, like it was just an open cargo bed where you could have easily like transported, a crew, like a firefighting crew and all their gear in and drop them off. You could, just drop supplies, medical, anything like that, but it was empty. And I suspect that's because he was doing water drops, right? And so he didn't need to have anything on the inside of it. He wanted to keep it as light as possible, and then his load was just water. So, but I was surprised how big, and that's just one pilot in his machine, right? So obviously there's probably different styles and different sizes of helicopters out there that people are using for those, but it was cool, right? It was one of those cool experiences I got to have, like when you're riding with the IC, right? When you're riding with the man, and he knows all the pilots, and they know him, and they just want to bullshit, and that I got to have as a person who liked to go in. I like to explore the things and touch the things, and I got like just like a curious mind about stuff like that. I know some people who are watching knitting channel like, I don't care, right? But but it was one of those cool experiences that I got to have with him, and I'm really glad I did. I'm always grateful for opportunities like that, especially as somebody who's visually impaired, right, and can't always I'm not totally blind, so I can see pictures, and I do look at stuff on on the internet and try to zoom it in and stuff like that, but I really can't I don't have depth perception, and there's just a lot of things wrong with my eyes, and so even seeing pictures, I have a hard time sometimes conceptualizing of things. I think for somebody who's visually impaired, I do pretty well spatially, but at the same time, I can see a picture in sort of like a two-dimensional, and can't, I don't even have depth perception in real, when other people would have three-dimensional things and seeing things, I don't even have that, and so I can have a harder time sometimes conceptualizing space and things in space, and so it was a cool experience for me to even though the pilot didn't come in there with me and answer my 25 million questions, right? It was still a cool experience to go up and to be turned loose, right? I mean, who's gonna turn you loose in their helicopter and just be like, yeah, whatever, go in there and check it all out, right? He must have felt pretty confident that I wasn't gonna accidentally take off and fly the thing. I don't know, but anyway, and I don't even remember any of the details about that pilot at all. I don't remember if he was a former service member or whatever, but I just know that my ex-boyfriend used to work with a lot of old Vietnam pilots. I'm gonna go for today. Maybe I'll tell you guys some of those stories if there's another time of flying with the Vietnam guys and his experience with them. But anyways, you guys, I'm gonna go for now. I feel like we chatted long enough, but we put on a few rounds. I don't even remember how many rounds, at least 2, maybe 3. I don't know anymore, but as you can tell, right, as a fingering weight project, it's growing small. We don't know how big we're gonna make this top. We don't. We could be almost done with it. We don't know. It's getting fairly big. We don't know, right? We don't even know if we're going to finish it. It might show up yet again on Frogger to finish it, because I'm not 100% committed to it yet. So I'm just knitting, right? I'm just sitting and knitting and playing with my yarn. So And my little yarn ball didn't get a lot smaller. To here I was fretting and worrying about it because, you know, different yarn sizes, we talk all the time, right? Different yarn sizes, you're going to go through that yarn a lot quicker versus a number one fingering weight, right? These little strings, you're not going to go through it very quickly. So we still got yarn to go. I was worried for nothing about that. So anyways, y'all, I am going to go for now, but don't forget, tool sale at We Crochet and tool sale at Knit Picks through the one at We Crochet is through the 15th. The one at Knit Picks is through the 16th. And like I said, Knit Picks, you can get things like stitch stoppers and, you know, for your right, your knitting needles, right? As opposed where I didn't see any of those at We Crochet, and so definitely keep that in mind, right? Different tools for different crafts, right? So, alrighty, my friends, well, you know we got to say, right? Creativity is for everybody, whether you see or you see like me, which is not in color and not in the day, or you don't see at all. Creativity is for you. And whether it's knitting or crocheting or sewing or quilting or beading or sculpting or painting or weaving or carving or whatever it is that you do, today is a great day to craft and create. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, happy stitching. Bye-bye for now. Get all my needle tips gathered up here. Make sure I'm not the person that grabs their project, right, in an unsafe way by only 2 needles and has the whole thing go sliding off the needles. Disaster. Oh my goodness.